So we're going to get started and want to welcome our presenters, Maddie, Vicki, and Lynette from the Maine Family Planning Association, as well as Kelly, who's going to do just a quick segment. After you guys are done with your presentation, she'll share her virtual classroom for sexuality education, which she also showed in her virtual classroom session, but she'll just highlight that again. And we have a small group here, so I would say if folks have a question, just unmute and say, excuse me, and somebody can call on them and answer questions. But we are recording because a lot of people are not able to be on this week because they're wrapping up things at their school. Had a couple of people email this morning, bummed out, but they needed to be in a Google Classroom training with their district. So just for various things happening, but excited to have it as a recording that will be in our bank of resources. So looking forward to your new information, updated information you have to share. And I will.
And, Susan, Lynette will want to share her screen because she has
I've already enabled that, so you guys should be able to do that. And remember, if you haven't yet, sign into the chat box. And there will be an evaluation that'll be coming out, and it's really more of a survey / evaluation at the end of all of the session. So thank you very much, and I will turn it over to y'all. There you go.
I can't wait.
Thank you. I realized that I didn't open the PowerPoint before, so hold on. Oops.
Vicki, you might want to talk a little bit about, or Lynette, while you're doing that,
Yep.
what you guys will be doing.
Can you see the screen?
We can.
Okay. Well, we've been working pretty hard to revise best practices and also at the same time really shift everything that we were doing, you know, kind of the hands-on work we do with schools and community organizations this spring, you know, to trying to figure out virtual learning and all of that. So it's not as bad as trying to teach a class, you know, school full of children. But, you know, we too are trying to keep up. And we've gotten a lot of great information from you all on these office hours, as well as individually with educators that we work with. So I just wanted to go over, I have like a really quick set of slides to tell you all that we have been working on the 2020 edition of Best Practices. The last time we made changes was in 2016, and believe it or not, a lot has changed in sex ed, so we wanted to be up to date and respond to needs and all of that. So we hope to have it printed in the next month or two and have it available for the fall. So it was time for an update because we were getting feedback from educators, what they were using, not using, what resonated, what didn't resonate with their students. So definitely we really enjoy getting feedback from you all, and either our work with kind of one-on-one with teachers, we've gotten some of that feedback, and then also kind of in general from educators on, you know, office hours and things like that. And feedback from students is also really at the heart of some of the changes that we've made. We have about 1,000 to this year is about 1,000, but generally about 1,600 students, either in 8th grade or in high school, who have whose teachers have delivered best practices, and sometimes other curricula as well, or some combination of best practices and other curriculum resources. And we have a pre and a post assessment that some teachers use with their students. Those teachers who or schools who partner with us, we actually create a data report so they can actually see from the pre to the post what students learn and kind of the change in knowledge or skills. So that's been really valuable information. So we can actually highlight areas that are not resonating as well, or maybe best practices is missing the mark. For instance, one of those is where can you go for local services? So I know that was one of the, you know, from pre to post curriculum where we weren't seeing some of the gains in knowledge that we thought we should. So some of that feedback is really important, as well as in the exit assessment. We haven't what else would you like to learn, or what was missing from your, sex ed unit, and we get a lot of great feedback from students, just writing in, things that they thought were good and, things that they thought fell short. So that's really been valuable as well. There's been updates in sex ed, this whole, Me Too movement and affirmative consent has really changed. It's not like consent is brand new, but it's really changed the way we think and talk about it, and given us some really good guidelines for what we should be doing around consent. Nationally, we get a lot of resources from other states, other national organizations, and so some of that information has helped influence the changes that we're making. And then we're filling in gaps, some things that we just felt were missing. And again, we look back at the student pre and post assessments, and it just seemed like there was some missing information. So basically, I'm going to go over just the highlights of the changes that we're making. We're trying to make it a lot more skill-based. So identifying reliable web resources is much more at the forefront of our lesson units, practicing communication skills. So not only identifying, what's effective communication, but actually having scenarios and role plays where they actually have to test out those new communication skills. Accessing services, we're trying to incorporate that more in the lessons of best practices. And not only family planning or reproductive health, sexual health services, but also, the local domestic violence or sexual assault agencies that can provide services and support. LGBTQ organizations around the state where young people could go to for support. So we've kind of broadened that, accessing services, and including online services as well. And then having some activities that apply and personalize the knowledge. So creating something that's not so knowledge heavy, like, describe the types of STDs, but actually applying that knowledge and focusing less on all those details, which you can get completely lost in, because there's so much to learn about every single STD, but maybe it's less about them having all that information as it is applying and personalizing it. So we're trying to put more of a focus, and best practices did that already, but we're just putting more emphasis on those, applying and personalizing and developing skills. So one of the key areas is we did a whole overhaul of the curricula, looking at inclusive language, making sure that we weren't saying males and females, or the guy does this, the girl does that, and really thinking about behaviors as well. So it wasn't like, when a guy and a girl, you need to prevent pregnancy. And not that we didn't really have that kind of language in best practices. We'd already shifted a little bit to making it more inclusive, but we've actually gone even further and trying to be more inclusive of different bodies and different behaviors that don't necessarily align with, someone's gender identity or body parts. Terms and definitions, we have an activity in the first lesson that presents some different terms and definitions for sexual health terms, like what does, consent mean? But we've also now expanded to include terms and definitions related to sexual orientation and gender identity. That was definitely something that students have been asking for years in those pre and post assessments, the post assessments for what more information do you want? And that has clearly been a demand of students that they aren't getting. There's no discussion around different, sexual orientation, gender identities within their sexual health unit. So we actually have a new set of terms and definitions, and recognizing that there's a gazillion terms and definitions out there. And so I think we've helped educators kind of focus in on some of the important ones, plus giving them some resources for, here if you want to explore more, or here's some great resources for, delving a little deeper, or having students who are really interested in knowing more, some websites for folks. Diversity is more represented in our scenarios. We've even tried to include folks with maybe cultural or religious differences or diversity in the scenarios, but we've tried to, not just have gender neutral names, but also, situations where people might be negotiating oral dam use because they're not engaging in the kind of sexual activity that requires condom, or vaginal penile sex, but different kinds of sexual activity. So we've tried to represent more diversity there. And then also where they can go for support. Where,
Hello, sorry for the interruption. Just a reminder, the ed tech, we will have.
okay. So consent is also a new topic that we've woven throughout. And again, consent, freely given, informed, reversible, enthusiastic, and specific. So we have definitions in our communication and consent lesson 3 now, and we're going to talk more about affirmative consent through all the lessons. So even if you're talking about condom use and you're talking about STD prevention or birth control, we're going to be weaving in the whole theme of affirmative consent throughout the entire curriculum, which we're very excited about. And then again, defining what it means, applying it, and practicing how it sounds and what it might be like with even in friendship groups, but also in relationships. So we're pretty excited about that. And then we do want to make the lessons easily adaptable to distance learning, virtual learning, and taking advantage of technologies that educators might be using in the classroom. This, I would have to say, we focus really on an in-class, one-on, the in-class person-to-person type of classroom environment. But now we want to take some of those lessons and create ways that educators could do that virtually or incorporate technology. So we're still learning, and I would even say we might put an appeal or a call out to educators who might want to work for us this summer to be kind of our consultants and help us come up with new ideas. So we've already learned a lot from educators on these office hours and talking to folks, but we need to expand that and create more adaptations, because who knows what things are going to look like this fall. And even if we are back in the classroom and schools are, continuing as, not virtual, but in class, in person education, we still think that there are great opportunities for creating some of this content to be done using technology. So that's all I have. So best practices, we have a training of educators training that we are planning to do. We put it on the books for May. We switched it to October. Who knows? But right now we have October 6th through 7th. We'll see when the time gets closer if that's something that we will have in person. It's going to be in Auburn at the moment, but we are completely considering also doing it online as an online series of trainings to introduce the changes of best practices and do some kind of educator training. So that should happen this fall, so stay tuned. And I will stop sharing. And each of us, Maddie, Vicki, and I, we all have like one component of the curriculum changes that we're going to talk about. So I think, Maddie, are you up next?
Yes, I am up next. So I worked on a bunch of different lessons with Lynette and Vicki, and I have to say I'm just like really excited for the changes that we're making. I think, someone who identifies as non-binary and queer, I think it's so much more inclusive. As someone who's worked in domestic violence and sexual assault, I think we're taking things to the next level in terms of, like Lynette said, skill building and actually how do you apply this so it's relevant to your life. So I'm going to highlight the changes we made to lesson 3 on communication and consent. But before I show you some of the changes we make, I just want to just acknowledge that oftentimes our conversations of consent, I think, are a little bit flawed, right? So the consent partly has a framework from a law mindset, right? And so how do we litigate, sexual assault cases? And we want the framework to be from a prevention mindset, right? So it's not just how do you not assault someone, right? But how do you have helpful communication in a relationship so that everyone has a positive experience, right? So sometimes I think consent can be talked about in kind of a transactional mindset, like, can I do this to you, right? And I often say sex isn't something you do to someone, sex is something you do with someone, right? So it's a conversation. And that's something we really wanted to highlight, that it's not just, I think one of the also ways that people protest consent is they're like, oh, it's awkward and I have to ask, like, can I kiss you? And like, can I touch you here? And can I touch you there? And can I do this? And it's more of, we want people to be having a conversation like, what do you want? You know, what feels good to you? What is exciting to you? Things like that. So let's just dive into some of the changes that we made. So I'm going to share my screen. And we have put it in when we had that document we had like online learning document that we put out, and one of the links in that. So I'll pull that up too. No, that was not it. Let me see. So we had put out, what was it called? Trying to remember. It was like distance learning resources, which I can't find right now. But one of the resources that we put out was a communicating boundaries and consent. And I copied this from, this is copied from our new curriculum. So our new curriculum looks like this. You'll get to see it hopefully soon, definitely by the fall. We're hoping to finish it by the end of June. But some of the pieces we have in here are the same. So for example, in the previous curriculum, we talked about assertive, passive, and aggressive communication styles. And so this could be used, again, in an online format, again, if you are doing online in the fall, or again, it could be used like it was previously in the classroom. But we're still having people identify what are the different aspects of communication. But then rather than having activities focus on them having to identify what is the assertive statement, what's the passive statement, what's the aggressive statement, which feels a little bit, I think, easy for a high school student, right? We want them to actually practice, how do you use assertive communication, right? And so we have a handout where they have to write assertive statements, and recognizing that part of assertive statements is saying, like, how do you feel, right? And what do you want? You know, you have to say that. So we have, for example, this scenario 1, bunch of friends are going skinny dipping. Everyone's like, great, we'll do this. But one person, Mickey's like, feels a little self-conscious and doesn't, you know, want to get naked, is afraid of being teased if they don't join in. So what can Mickey say? Mickey can say, you know, I feel uncomfortable about skinny dipping because, you know, that's not something I want to do. You know, I'm going to stay in my underwear. And they get to fill in the statement with whatever they want. And again, they're practicing communicating, you know, how they feel about whatever the situation is, and what they want to do in a clear way. And we also have scenarios where there's opportunities for bystander as well. So for example, you know, Taylor goes to a basketball game with some friends. A couple of his friends make crude comments to the cheerleaders, and Taylor's uncomfortable, wants them to stop being jerks, right? So Taylor can say, hey guys, I really feel like angry, maybe, or they get to fill in the blank when you, you know, call them whatever it is, cut it out. And so there's those opportunities. We also have the skill building continue with, similarly, we had this handout in the previous curriculum where there's a sexual scenario and there has to be a dialogue created. But the difference is, in the previous curriculum, it was focused on refusal skills. And I think that was reinforcing a dynamic of oftentimes the boy or the man, you know, like not wanting to use a condom or whatever it is, and the role of the woman or the girl in the relationship saying like, oh no, this is really important. And we don't want to be reinforcing those stereotypes. Again, we want to be promoting and modeling how do you have open, honest, respectful communication where you're communicating your feelings, saying what you want while being respectful of the other person's boundaries. So they have an opportunity to do that, filling in the dialogue for both characters. And again, it's important for both people to be communicating their feelings in this situation, right? So that's another change to activity in lesson 3. And then a big one that we changed was having more clearly about what is affirmative consent, right? Because 2019, we got to teach affirmative consent in our secondary schools, right? So first of all, we're defining affirmative consent, and we do use the Planned Parenthood's FRIES model. So talking about, is it freely given, without violence or coercion, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. And then we have opportunities for them to say, you know, what does consent sound like and what does not consent sound like? And we want to also promote the idea that it's not a binary, right? It's not yes or no. A lot of times it's like, I'm not sure, like, Or, yeah, I really want to do this, but not right now, right? There's a lot of gray area, and that's a real life situation. We want to promote how do you navigate real life situations that are complicated, and it's often not like, yeah, I'm like super enthusiastic and it's perfect timing right now, or like, no, I definitely don't want to do this. So we want as much as possible to have real life scenarios. So we did a spectrum activity that we've added to lesson 3. And it's a red light, yellow light, green light based upon an article in Scarlet Teen that we've linked to that you can read. So green light being like they're communicating, things are great, keep communicating and progress forward. Yellow light being like maybe again someone's not sure what they want, maybe there's mixed signals or something like that, so it's time to slow down and keep check in. And red light being someone's too intoxicated to either gauge or give consent, someone's asleep, etc. So with the red light, green light activity, if you're in the classroom, right, you have the scenarios and people would, put it up on the board. But if you're doing distance learning, we also have an opportunity for a student to just fill it out like a worksheet, read the scenario, circle what they think it is, and say why they think it is, and then what would need to be happening to make it more green, right, to make it more of a positive communication rather than a violation of a boundary. So that's another piece that we've added to lesson 3 to have affirmative consent. And the last thing I want to highlight within this lesson is we have a handout we've added on building self-awareness to practice affirmative consent, because what I also find is an assumption of consent is that we assume that people know what they want, and we assume that people know what they don't want, and that they feel confident communicating what they want and confident communicating what they don't want. And in reality, I don't think that's true. So we have a bunch of self-reflection questions, and again, this is to hopefully promote some of that social emotional learning, that self-reflection and self-awareness. And it has questions like, what does it feel like when I know I want to do something? How do I usually express my wants and desires? Am I ever so excited that I do something without checking in with other people first? Am I ever afraid to say what I want? And then who and when and where am I most comfortable saying what I want? And the maybe could be, what does it feel like when I'm not sure if I want to do something? How do I make a decision? Who do I talk to? Have I ever done something I was unsure about and felt bad about it later? Or have I ever done something because I was unsure and then I wish I'd done it later? And similar, we have questions with the no, and that could be, is it easy for you to say no? Have you ever been afraid to say no because you wanted to avoid conflict? I think the other big piece we have here is, have you ever been told no and felt defensive, rejected, or sad? So we want both sides of the equation to be reflective. Again, both the person saying the no and the person hearing the no. The person saying yes or saying what they want and the person hearing that information. We want to promote, again, this idea of mutuality and respect, and not one person advancing and another person having to defend, right? So that's something we're trying to build within the curriculum. And another thing we have throughout the lessons, again, is highlighting the resources and letting educators know that, this is a map from the Maine Coalition Against Sexual Assault, letting folks know that there are local resources wherever you are in the state, and a lot of them have education teams or education staff to help educators out. So please reach out to those resources. And then we do have an accessing services lesson too. And we're gonna, let folks know that you can use things like text or chat, and young people can practice utilizing that resource if they do ever feel like, I experienced some sexual harassment online or in the hallway or in a relationship. So where do they go to get support? And another piece that's not in the curriculum, but we do have linked within our resource page for COVID-19 is the interview. So promoting young people talking to, whether that's an older sibling, a parent or guardian, or something like that, on topics related to sex and relationships. And why I'm bringing this up, and because I do think it is related to consent, is the more we practice talking about our bodies, sex, and relationships in non-sexual spaces, the easier it will be to communicate in sexual spaces, right? So we have a lot in the curriculum, like how can you practice consent in a friendship, or in a school? And so that will make it easier to translate when you're in a sexual relationship as well. I feel like, have I talked enough, Lynette, or do you want me to keep going? I have lots to say on the topic, so please feel free to ask questions. But yeah, we're here for you. I mean, I think that's a big thing. Me, Vicki, Lynette, please reach out if you ever want to adapt something. And again, we made this curriculum. I'm really proud of it. The updates that we have made in alignment with main standards, but there's also a lot of other great curriculum out there. So if you're using something else or you want to modify something, just let us know and we're here.
Maddie and
Awesome. It's fantastic.
this might be a good time to open up for questions. Comments, questions from anybody?
Very well done. I can see it connecting in so many different ways to a lot of things that I'm using, especially virtually with everything I've learned. And wheels are turning.
Great. Ralph?
I don't have a question. I just want to say, Maddie, you rocked it. I've done a couple of Zoom meetings with you. You're very enthusiastic about your subject matter. And even as a teacher, it's very educational just to listen to you. So thank you very much. I appreciate your expertise.
It's something I geek out about. So like seriously, even if you don't have a question, you just want to talk to me, like email me, put it in the chat. Like I get really excited about this stuff.
And Maddie will be doing our session next Wednesday and talking about inclusivity and diversity and more about what you were already talking about.
Great job.
Nancy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say also that you guys have both done an excellent job, and I'm happy to see the changes. I'm really happy to see the changes to the curriculum, and some of the activities that you shared today are very similar to ones that I do with the elementary and middle school. So I'm very glad to see that they align. That we're all kind of on the same page, and it's really nice to see.
Good.
I was just going to say that, Nancy, to your point, we actually reached out, and we had, with folks that Maddie has some connections with YAP down in Southern Maine, and we talked a little bit with Mikasa. So we definitely got input from the DVSA community because we did want to be aligned. And we also say in our curriculum, this lesson isn't meant to be everything about, you need to reach out to your local resources because they also have important information and education programs that will align with this. But so we have more resources that ask educators to reach out to their local centers.
Doreen?
I have a question. My administration has pushed back against our health teachers teaching any of the sexuality stuff online this spring. Going forward, I'm hoping that they're going to be a little bit more open to being a little bit more inclusive. Do you have any strategies or suggestions about how to convince them, for lack of a better word right now, about how that this is, we just can't keep on pushing kids forward with having gaps of information and learning, because whether we have COVID-19 or not, they're still going to engage in relationships, and we want to make sure that kids are making good, healthy choices.
I think in our distance learning document that we did, we have a whole section on how kind of the rationale for why we still need to, even if we're doing virtual distance learning, why this information is important and some considerations to make. And we have a whole section on, if you're concerned about, young people in their own homes and privacy and younger siblings, we have some tips on that. But I don't know, Susan or Jean, I know it is part of the health standards. And so I'm hoping, this spring, everyone was just like trying to figure things out. But hopefully if we're in the situation in the fall, there's a little more thought that can go into it. And then hopefully we can, work with some educators this summer or with Jean and Susan to come up with a strategy. So most definitely we want to support you all.
Yeah, Doreen, I would have a question. Are they talking this spring or talking next year?
Well, there's still, we still don't know what next year is going to look like, but part of the conversation for next year is looking at doing more interdisciplinary teaching, because we're so afraid of the amount of time that we're going to have to work with the kids if it's online all the time. So they're still looking at advocacy, how we could do advocacy kind in with persuasive writing with the language arts, and how it could be tied in with science when you're looking at, impacts on the environment. So there's going to be, I still get the sense that there's going to be a limited amount of health instruction online compared to what I've had in the past. And so I know at some point we're looking at, maybe that's tomorrow's prioritizing, content and, things of that sort. And just try to support and help people. I mean, the elementary teachers don't want to do their puberty stuff, and they're worried about all this social and emotional sensitivity to things, and doing those online, and they're pushing back, which means it's gonna keep on snowballing.
Yeah, I will say a big part of it is going to be advocating and educating administration about not only what you do, but why you do it and the rationale behind it. Claire Lynn Roundtree, of course, you know her. Yeah. So she, that was a unit she was coming up on, and she went and talked to her superintendent, and she shared this on one of the Zooms, so I feel fine sharing it. And they were like, no. And by the time she got done explaining why, they supported her, and she was able to do her unit. So you might want to talk with her about some of the key points.
I know she and I talked a lot about what, because we both live in neighboring towns, and our superintendents and administrators talk, and I'm like, how are you getting away with this? And I'm saying no. It's like, this is damn.
But she did go to them, and she made her case for it. And that, unfortunately, this is a topic that quite often the personal beliefs of the administration have to be addressed. I think is the way I would put it, that explaining why it's so important. It's about the health, well-being, safety of students, as well as you're not stopping their growth and development because it's COVID-19, and now they're in situations that in so many ways they need this information even more to be
because they're unsupervised even more in a lot of cases. Exactly.
So if that's that whole rationale and explanation, but at the same time continuing on that conversation in terms of, and let me explain how I would do this in a way that is safe, respectful. We've trimmed down the information. We have these great resources that we can utilize. So it needs to be like a full-on pitch. So that's probably the best I can offer, but absolutely it is part of the learning results, part of the curriculum, and an expectation. Might also look at getting some support from a school board member or two if you have any you can tap into. I happen to know there's one you can tap into for SAD 75 that would be supportive. And I don't know all of them. I only know the one that one person that I know is on there. But that is another strategy to use, is to help them to understand. One of the things that I find administrators are the most concerned about is the backlash. You do that, and then the parents call me and say, blah, blah, blah. So that's why if you can offer them rationale, explanation, clearly this is what I'm going to do, that empowers the administrator to then, if they get a phone call, say, well, I understand your concerns, but let me explain with language they wouldn't have until you give it to them. So you might even put some of that stuff in writing to share with them. People have thoughts on that?
I would just add that I would ask them to detail their specific concerns and say, I'm here to, we're here to solve problems during this time. And so if you don't tell me specifically what your concerns are, then we can't address those concerns. Because, similar to our new conflict or resolution, healthy relationships chapter, we have to know, what are your boundaries, what's going on, and then we can come up with a solution together. But unless you tell me what those are, we can't do a whole lot about it, right? So, and I would encourage, that maybe in an email too, so you can come up with creative ways to get everyone's needs met in a way that works.
Yeah, it's the first time for me, that I've ever had any resistance like this. And I'm like, and I didn't push back because it was this, we're jumped into this whole new mess, and I don't want to, everyone was stressed out, but I'm just going forward, I don't want to give up on stuff in the, next fall.
Right. And you probably would want to have that conversation first with your building principal.
Yeah.
And then, let the building principal know you are more than happy to go have the conversation with curriculum coordinator and or superintendent as well.
Yep.
Other thoughts on that one from anybody?
I would say, this has been something that has been ongoing, I think, since we've been doing sexual health. And Susan certainly did sexual health as a family life educator years ago, so would know that as well. But one of the things when we started looking at our programs, we knew that we wanted to make them Maine-based, specifically for Maine educators and for Maine youth. And so originally when we started this current program that we're doing, we were utilizing curriculum from all over the country, and we knew that it was great curriculum, but it didn't quite fit our ruralness, or even in our cities. Our cities are still rural in a way. And so we've taken a lot of time over the years to make sure that our materials and the things that we suggest really fit the nature of Maine. And so when we talk to administrators, we talk to superintendents about our programs, that's kind of a bottom line that we talk about, that we recognize the limitations both in physical distances, but also in the way that people think about sexual health. And I think using our programs help kind of navigate through some of the concerns that folks have. So, and then the last point I want to make on that is, again, I think during, you know, what you were saying and what Susan said about having that personal interaction with your building principal, your superintendent, and when Susan gave that description about someone going in and being able to change that person's mind just by having a conversation. I think it's the unknown and the fear of what can happen versus let's talk it through, and then let's figure out if this does happen, how we're going to respond. And I think that makes a world of difference, and having that personal connection really helps. So kudos to those that are willing to do that.
I like your suggestion. We've never had a problem. In our district's always been very supportive of the Maine family planning, you know, materials and curriculum. We've never had any pushback about that. It's just like how to reach out and say, let's have a conversation this summer so that we don't, you know, once we know what we're going to be doing, what kind of learning we're going to be doing, you know, we don't want this to get pushed off or say no again. We want to make sure that we can proceed, and this is how we'd like to proceed and why.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks, guys.
So I'm doing the next section on some changes that we made, which Maddie's hard to follow, and I've got a little bit of a sore throat, so I'm not going to be able to do the animated stuff, but hopefully you'll get some information. And I am excited about this lesson. Maddie and I started working on it together, and I finished it up a bit, and then we worked on the steps. So the lesson that I'm working on has actually been changed. Originally in our best practices, it was lesson 6, and it was about barrier methods. And we've put it now to lesson 5. And it's in between STIs and then a lesson on what's the risk. And we thought that that was a good fit when you're able to talk about barriers. So some of the changes that we did in this lesson, I'm going to mention some of those, and then how to possibly flip this lesson to do a virtual online lesson. So you're going to see the change. Instead of saying male and female condoms, we now say external and internal condoms. And so we're describing how the method is used rather than by who is using it. And again, that supports being inclusive and making sure that you're speaking to everyone in the classroom when you're talking about condoms. We also are promoting using the word oral instead of dental dam. So again, we're describing how a method is used versus a dentist using it in a dentist office, and making it, I think, more real to young people. And the other exciting thing, and we know that educators sometimes have a problem doing classroom demonstrations using actual condoms in the classroom. And so sometimes have to revert to a condom lineup, the condom lineup steps. How many folks do the condom lineup steps? Great, awesome. And so that often is used either in conjunction with doing the demonstrations in a classroom, or it is used instead of doing the demonstration in the classroom. What we've added this year is very exciting. We've added oral dam steps, which again speaks to making sure that we're speaking to everyone in the classroom. And so I don't know, can I share the screen? Oh,
Yes, you can, Vicki.
okay, and here it is. Let's see, am I able to click on that? So can you see that? Good. And so what we did, and I'm a slow scroller, so I'm just going to show you, I'll get down to the oral dam steps so that you can see what they look like. We also wanted to make sure that they looked very similar to the external condom lineup. So we start off with talking about doing the demonstrations in classroom and explaining to the students the change in the terminology of condoms. We've also added, what's another great thing, and I'll talk a little bit about using videos in the virtual piece. We've added more videos so that if teachers either don't want to do the demonstration themselves or have students do them, there are also videos that they can watch. And so we've added more videos to the lesson, which is, I think, really cool. So then you'll see the external condom steps, which you're pretty familiar with if you've seen our curriculum or you use a curriculum that uses condom steps. There's the step and the talking point. I'm going to mention about the talking points in a few minutes. So there's the external, and the oral dam steps follow that. And so we've come up with some options using the different steps and how to use them in conjunction with each other. And again, you'll see the talking points there. One of the things that we've added to try to make this bring in students more into the conversation is we've suggested if the teacher, when they're doing the condom demonstration, doesn't utilize the talking points themselves, that the talking points could be copied and pasted on the back of the steps. And so that means when you have students line up to do their step lineup, they would read what the front of the card says, ask or give consent to having oral sex, and we have pictures that go along with that. And then they would have the talking points on the back. So again, students are hearing their own voices giving these talking points. And sometimes we know that that is an elevated tool to helping them personalize that information. So that's, I think, one of the big major steps that we did in this lesson was adding the oral dam steps. I want to kind of feed on what Maddie said. In some of the lessons previously in best practices, we talked a lot about refusal skills. And we're trying to change the narrative and how to have that language. And so one of the lessons, instead of making condoms easier to use, we have a new activity, and I'll just scroll down to it quickly. And it's called Barriers to Using Barrier Methods. So this is a new activity instead of them making condoms easier to use, which again referred back to the refusal skills. So we have different ways that the activity can be done, but I just wanted to show you then an example. So students would receive a statement, and this is how they would work on it. So the example here, you'll see it says, when your partner says, I'd use condoms, but there's no place close where I can get them. We know that that is a common thing, but we also know that previously in best practices and other curriculum, it was, well, then I'm just not going to have sex with you, or other lines that people would come up with. We also know that many people that are in relationships or are sexually active with a partner or someone that they're having sexual relationships with want to stay in that relationship. So we wanted to help them navigate through that. So we came up with validating what the person is saying, provide suggestions, and then what you can do to work together for the solution. And we thought this lesson spoke to the way that we want the theme of the curriculum to be, is the affirmative consent piece, so that a person could still come back and say, hey, we're going to wait until we have condoms before we have sex. I mean, that may be the bottom line and the boundary that someone has. Other people may have other things that they want to work through in the solution. So we wanted young people to have that opportunity rather than just that universal, okay, that's it, I'm walking away from this relationship. So that was a big part of it. And then throughout this lesson and then in our birth control methods lesson, we wanted to make sure that we also talked about dual methods. And so we talk a little bit about this this message. We started it, I think, in one of the earlier lessons where it was one of the questions that was asked. And so we wanted to make sure that it was a theme, because we know that as students age in high school, they're more likely to be using a hormonal method or a LARC, a long-acting reversible contraceptive method, that the condom rate goes down slightly. And so we wanted to make sure that when we talk about barriers, that we highlight that if you're on a hormonal method, that you're going to be hopefully using a barrier method at the same time. So those were some of the big pieces that we did in this section. And if I just close it and stop the share, am I going to be able to get out of here without knocking people out?
Yes,
Nope.
if you put
Yes.
stop share.
Yeah.
Stop share. Okay, let's get out of here. You can tell how great I learned in my Zoom class, which was, so stop share, there it is. And so that, I think, was a big piece. We're very excited about this lesson and the way it was rewritten. Also want to share that folks that are a part of that Facebook Maine Health Teachers Toolbox, we are learning so much from you. And Nancy, thank you, because Nancy's on there a lot, and Kelly, and it's great because we are able to go on there and see what great things you're doing and then steal them for ourselves. No, we don't do that, but it's just great because then it gives us ideas and we know what you're using out there, and being able to work in conjunction with you, I think, is really, really exciting. So I think that is, some of the things in that lesson that we are really looking forward to, and knowing that we're going to be able to speak to folks in the audience, in the classroom audience, that may not have felt like they were heard before. So any questions on there? All right, so I'll turn it
Fantastic
over.
job. Yeah, fantastic.
Thanks, Jean. Well, you've been a part of it, Jean, so take credit.
Yeah, but you all, I mean, this looks like, this is just fantastic, finished product.
Yeah, we're moving along. We're excited. So I'm going to turn it back over to Maddie.
Well, there's a lot more changes that we're making right now, and some of them are still in the works. So I think the rest of the call, since we're running out of time, it would be great to hear from Kelly, and then any other suggestions that you educators might have for us as we kind of finalize our last edits for the curriculum. We would love to hear from you, but I also am really excited to see what Kelly has.
Yeah, have you haven't seen her or the virtual classroom yet? Yeah, this is great.
You're going to love it.
We love virtual sex ed. It's awesome.
Kelly, can I ask you, did you have that on the Facebook, the toolbox?
I shared one of my mindful classrooms. What I'm gonna let you view today, and I don't have this one posted the way I'm going to show you today, but it's just to maybe plant a seed. And if you'd like to talk more about it with me later, I'm very excited with what you just showed. And like I said, my mind is on overdrive right now, how I would use this information, whether in person or virtually. So with that said, I'm just gonna go ahead, I think, and be able to share my screen.
Yes, you can, Kelly.
Okay, let's go for it, folks. Here we go. Bada boom, bada bing. Let's see. Okay, everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, this was not a room that I created. I just want to make sure that anytime we like that word steal or share, this was a sexuality virtual classroom that someone else shared, and I just plugged some things on it literally as we were having this meeting today. So this would just be, a classroom setting, and I happen to plant my avatar in the seat here, my Bitmoji. But what I could see happening here is I just threw on the state of Maine, and I linked to your Maine family planning. So this would be something that I would put up on my Google Classroom, and I would definitely make it all main resources. This particular one has different resources, and I'm not downplaying any, but I too know the needs of our students, and that's a big point to advocate to administration as to why these resources are very applicable to our kids and their needs, and that's huge. So I threw the state of Maine up here, and just for instance, if a student was to click on the image, it is now linked to the website. If I want to use something specific off in your website that I really wanted the students, we've done a lesson on, or virtually we're exploring it, I may not have everything up at once, but I certainly would be adding to this classroom depending on what we were covering. It could be the birth control methods. And again, I've already gone ahead and just taken students specifically to that part of the page. Consent definitely could be in here, and we obviously know how important the help aspect is. If I wanted to link an image to help, I would certainly have it ready kind of ahead of time and know where I wanted to go. And I'm just going to insert a link and apply it to where I would want this particular image to take my students. The lessons that you've created, magnificent. I could see myself using my whiteboard or chalkboard or whatever else I use in my room projector to maybe put a lesson up at a time with discussion points. And I believe, Maddie, you had shared the one where they're typing in the responses to the lesson. I may also, as an educator, add choice there. So for the students that were comfortable, they would be typing. I would probably also add an audio link with the Google Doc for me personally, so my students could actually respond with their voice if they wanted to as well, especially privately later on outside of class. And I think it's just very important that they can go back to this information at any time. It's not just presented and then they never see or hear it again. I would definitely have this available after we added all the pieces that we thought were appropriate, and by the laws that bind you at your school, that the students definitely could go back to this and revisit this as an actual resource. If I wanted to save some time, I'd just copy and paste this, and again, I'd be adding to it as I go. I probably wouldn't put everything up all at once, but I would definitely concentrate on the help aspect right out of the gate, and definitely the assertive communication. Huge. I am so happy to hear that that's a big part of this. If we want to communicate it, that's definitely a sell point to administration as well, as to it's necessary. I can't see a curriculum without it. So this was just done quickly. Like I said, as you click onto different things, basically it just takes you to the resource that it's talking about. We've all seen this particular video. I just added the main pieces to this particular classroom today. And we just have to be careful that if we're using someone else's virtual platform, you're going through very carefully, you're looking at what they put, and if you simply don't want something there, you just simply delete it or add your own, or start with a landscape with this in the background as the idea.
Hey, Kelly.
Yes.
So if I was going to create one of these for my middle school, I like one of the things that you said that you can add things onto it as you go along. Can I create the whole slideshow and just add a slide to my Google Classroom at a time? So like if day one, I want them to do this part, but I have it all done this summer. And then, so I don't have to spend so much time during the school year updating and adding it as I go along.
Absolutely. And then you can add your own, you can certainly embed the videos.
Yep.
That you have. I'm a big advocate of that too. I like them to hear. I like them to hear their own voice.
Yep.
You'll go back, hear someone else. I think that's a huge aspect of it. You can literally embed anything.
Right. But like if I wanted to start with like my puberty for 6th grade, for example, I do a day on just like male gender or whatever, female gender or something of that sort. I can add each day, I can have a different slide for each day, and then they just keep on building on each other.
Yes, absolutely.
Very exciting.
And Kelly, I think you'll, based on what I've heard you say, Doreen, you're more than welcome to start from scratch, but Kelly will let you start with what she has, and then you can change to your own Bitmoji and
Everything.
not have to start from scratch, which is, as she said, she got it from someone else, and then she takes and modifies.
Her stress with her stress one, her wellness one.
Good.
If you could share this one, Kelly, is this one in the on the family on our health?
The original one from the creator is there, and I gave them credit for their original scaffolding.
Okay.
Obviously, I just like plunked myself in the chair and threw up the state of Maine, and I'm sorry that was not my best work by any means, but
Great start.
trying to do something in real time to show you how quickly you can certainly embed links. You could even have like the stoplight for your red, green, yellow aspect. You're just making it just visually appealing, as we know students love to do. And although I don't just want them sitting and learning from there, you would be linking that definitely to your lessons and our main resources, which is so huge.
Yeah.
And again, this could be brought in to an administrator if you applied it this way and saying, I'm presenting it in a safe aspect. This is how I plan on, like you said, Doreen, putting it out there. Man, I really can't see a problem with that. I just, and asking for it.
And I also wanted to say, Kelly, that, as I was just looking at that room, so if you wanted to, you had the reproductive system up there and then the pregnancy. So those you could click on, and that could be a link to the lesson on reproductive system.
Right.
That sort of thing, correct?
Yeah, right. And I'm a big advocate for, after you've done all the lessons, I like to keep a lot of that information up for my students to revisit. They may not have been invested in the lesson at the time, or we've all been there, but they remember that, and then they can go back, and maybe they didn't fill out the worksheet, but they're back there practicing, at least in their head. And if, it's so huge.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about Google Classroom, is that your lessons stay right there and they can go back and access them at any time.
So I'm very excited to play with that information in the virtual aspect. I just simply haven't had time to do a beautiful example that I would chuck out there for everyone to go at it.
Yeah.
But I will work on it.
Great.
Kelly, it looks great. I remember seeing the wellness one, I think, on the Facebook toolbox page. That was awesome. I didn't mention the steps and the lineup. I could see you can have them all jumbled in the classroom, and then the students go into breakout sessions to put them together. And so there's so many things. Awesome. It's great. Thank you. I see us being able to use that.
To put those up on a Quizlet and have your own link where they actually would, like you said, put them in that order. So that could be an activity or game that they complete and check off, yes. And they can go back and do it several times for success.
And that builds in the formative assessment. That's what I was just going to say,
Yeah.
Kelly. Now you've built in your formative assessment piece of it. So
Practice.
Yeah. You can use a Google form to do that too.
Absolutely.
And one of the things Kelly has said in some of our previous sessions that I really appreciate is varying the different approach you take. So you use the virtual classroom for, I'll just use this example for sexuality unit, but when you're using, doing something, let's say on nutrition, you might be using, some other approach. Throw one out for me. But she has
the Jeopardy game.
The Jeopardy game might be one you use with that. So bringing different aspects to them, so that it's always changing it up a little. Not that you can't repeat using something, but you wouldn't want to put everything into the virtual classroom.
Right.
So, and I really appreciate that. And for Vicki, Lynette, and Maddie, if you didn't get a chance to see these 2 sessions that were really helpful that you might be able to incorporate. One is how to do a Zoom Jeopardy game. And Beth Proglovich did a nice job walking us through how to do that, a tutorial on that, and setting that up in a way that's very creative. And then Nancy did one for us on doing a live Prezi. So she uses Prezi for hers, but also now is showing us how to do live Prezis, which is a really cool thing that you can take an existing Prezi presentation and a teacher can put themselves in the middle of it, assuming it's designed in a certain way. So again, those are different ways of presenting information to just kind of keep changing it up. And I like that idea. So, yeah.
This was excellent. Wow.
So much great information. Yes.
Yeah.
I have to leave, so I got to, but I want to thank you all for your sharing. Have a great rest of
Thanks,
the day.
Amy. Talk to
Oh,
you
you
soon.
too, Doreen.
Hope to see you tomorrow morning.
Yes.
All right, great. And we are recording, so we'll be transferring those. I am working really hard on learning how to do it. So once mine get posted there, it's going to be like all these get posted at one time. But this is great information. I know people couldn't be here and were wanting to know that it would be available for them. So yeah. So thank you all. And I want to also say how much I appreciate the time and effort and energy that you put in, as well as Nancy, into helping develop these distance learning, remote learning strategies for teachers to use and take advantage of, and for Kelly for all your sharing as well. It's just really helpful that we want to glean from each other and be able to move forward. So, yeah. Any last thoughts? Well, hearing none, I'm going to say thank you again.
Yep.
And I will stop.
Really appreciate
recording.
it.
Very, very appreciated.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.